My name is Daniel, and for almost 7 years, I worked night shifts in the Environmental Services Department at a mid-sized hospital in Ohio. Basically, I cleaned rooms after patients were discharged, sometimes after surgery, sometimes after long stays, and sometimes after they passed away. People think that doctors and nurses see the most disturbing parts of hospitals at night, but trust me, the cleaning staff sees the things no one else ever talks about. The story I'm about to tell happened in late 2022, on a weeknight during one of those 11 to 7 overnight shifts. It was cold already, early winter, and the hospital's heating system had that constant hum that you stop noticing after a while. The building always felt different after 11 p.m. The hallways get quiet, the elevators seem louder, and the whole place feels like it's holding its breath. That night, everything was normal at first. We had a couple discharges, a post-op clean, and a few routine tasks. But around 1:40 a.m., my supervisor radioed me. "Dan, room 412 just got cleared. Family's gone. Nurse signed off. Need you to prep it for morning." My stomach dropped, and not because of the work. Room 412 was at the very end of the East Wing, a hallway that already gave me weird vibes even on a good day. But more importantly, the patient in that room had passed away a few hours earlier. Elderly man, long stay, peaceful apparently, but it doesn't matter how someone dies. A death room always feels heavy, like the walls still remember. Still, it was part of the job. I grabbed my cart and made my way down the east corridor. The further down the hallway I walked, the darker it felt. The hospital uses motion sensor lighting during the night to conserve power, and the lights in that wing were slow to activate, like they needed a few seconds to wake up. So I walked in this weird stop-and-go pattern of darkness, followed by cold fluorescent light flickering on overhead. As I got closer to room 412, I heard movement. At first I thought it was just the air vents. They rumble, they shift, they click. It's common, but the sound coming from inside that room wasn't that. It sounded like someone shifting in a bed, a body adjusting, not loud but unmistakable. I stopped about 5 feet from the door. I knew the room was empty. Nurses don't call EVS until they've completely cleared the room. There should have been no one inside. I knocked lightly on the doorframe. No answer, but I heard it again. A soft, sudden exhale, like someone trying to catch their breath. The kind of sound a person makes when they're sick or exhausted. My skin went cold. I slowly pushed the door open just enough to peek through the crack. The room was dark except for the dim hallway light spilling in. The patient bed was empty, sheets pulled aside, IV lines removed, monitors unplugged, tray table pushed against the wall. The curtain was half pulled, still as stone. And in the corner, the chair was rocking, not fast, not violently, just a slow, steady back and forth motion, like someone had just stood up from it, like the weight had just shifted off. There's no airflow in those rooms, no vents aimed at that chair, no open windows, obviously. It was just rocking. I stepped back so fast my shoe smacked into my own cart. I grabbed my radio and pretended I had another assignment. I didn't want to admit I was spooked, so I just asked if room 412 could be pushed to the morning shift, but before I walked away, a nurse turned the corner. It was Maria, someone I trusted. She saw my face and immediately asked what was wrong. I just told her I thought someone was still in the room. She sighed and said, "All right, let's check together." We walked into the room, and of course, the chair was perfectly still now. Everything looked normal, silent, empty. She even flicked on the overhead light to show me. Nothing. She gave a small laugh. "Phantom movement happens sometimes. Air pressure changes when we open doors." I didn't argue, but I've worked there long enough to know the difference between a draft and the feeling that someone just left the room a few seconds ago. We finished the check. She left. I stood outside, forcing myself to breathe normally. Finally, I pulled my cart in and started the cleaning. The whole time, I kept glancing at that chair. As I stripped the bed, the overhead lights flickered. They did that sometimes, so I tried to ignore it. But then something happened that made my blood turn to ice. From the far end of the room, behind me, I heard a cough, a weak cough, the kind a very old, very tired person would make. I spun around so fast I nearly fell. No one was there. The doorway was empty. The chair was empty. The curtains didn't move. But I swear to God, I felt someone standing close behind me, Close enough that the air felt different, close enough that the tiny hairs on the back of my neck rose instantly. I backed out of the room, grabbed my cart, and didn't even bother finishing the clean. I left the lights on, closed the door quietly, and wrote on the checklist that morning shift would take it. I didn't say anything else about it until around 4 a.m. when I ran into one of the older nurses who'd worked there for decades. I asked, half joking, if anyone's ever had weird things happen in that wing. She gave me a look, not confused, not surprised, just knowing. Then she asked, "Was it 412? I didn't even have to answer. She told me, in this quiet, matter-of-fact voice, that the man who died in that room had been there for weeks. His family said he'd been complaining for days that someone kept sitting in the chair in the corner at night. He told them a man would sit there and watch him. Not a doctor, not a nurse, just a man he could never fully describe. The family assumed he was hallucinating from the medication. The nurse said, he died facing that chair. I didn't sleep the next morning. I didn't go back to that wing for a week. And even now, 2 years later, if someone mentions room 412, I change the subject, because I know what I heard in that room, and I know I wasn't alone. My name is Aaron, and when I was 17, I spent a few weeks in the hospital after a car accident. Nothing fatal, but bad enough that I needed a few surgeries and constant physical therapy. If you've ever stayed in a hospital overnight, you know the feeling. The way the building changes when visiting hours end, how the halls get too quiet, how every little sound echoes like it's happening right beside you. But what I experienced there is something I still can't explain. And even thinking about it now, years later, makes my stomach twist. I was on the 4th floor, the orthopedic wing. Most of the rooms were single bed, so nights were usually peaceful. My parents visited every day after work, but they always had to leave by 9 p.m. Once they were gone, that long stretch of night felt endless. A couple days into my stay, I noticed this kid wandering around the hallway. He looked like he was maybe 8 or 9 years old, small, with messy dark hair, wearing an oversized black hoodie and those thin hospital socks that never stay on your feet. The first time I saw him, he walked past my door slowly, not looking at me, not looking at anyone, just staring straight ahead with this blank expression on his face. I assumed he was a visitor's kid who got bored and slipped out of a room. No big deal. But the second time I saw him, it was weird. It was around midnight. I couldn't sleep, so I had the TV on low. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the hallway. I muted the TV and looked. It was the same kid, walking toward the elevators at the far end, same black hoodie, same slow steps, same expressionless look on his face. This time, I said, "Hey buddy, you okay? You lost?" He didn't turn around, didn't nod, didn't stop. He just kept walking like he didn't hear me. He pressed the elevator button, waited silently, and when the doors opened, he stepped inside without looking back. I pressed my call button and told the nurse that a kid was walking around alone. She checked and said no visitors with children were on that floor anymore. I didn't see him again for a couple of nights, and I figured he belonged to a patient on another floor and somehow wandered back and forth. But then came the night I'll never forget. It was around 2 a.m., and the entire floor was dead silent. I couldn't sleep because the pain kept flaring up, so I was just lying there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the occasional beep of the machines. My door was cracked open, giving me a clear view of the elevator doors down the hall. They were maybe 50 or 60 feet away, close enough that I could see when the lights above them changed. As I was watching, the elevator dinged, but the elevator didn't open. The doors stayed shut. Then I saw him, the kid. He appeared from the right side of the hallway, walking slowly toward the elevator again. His hoodie sleeves covered his hands. His socks made almost no sound on the tile floor, and his head was slightly tilted down, like he was staring at his own feet as he moved. I sat up instantly. When he reached the elevator doors, he didn't press the button. He just stood there, motionless, staring at the metal doors. I watched for maybe a minute, not moving, not blinking, just standing there like he was waiting for something only he could hear. Then the elevator dinged again. This time, The doors slid open, but the elevator was dark inside, lights off, empty like the power had flickered. The kid stepped inside without hesitation. Before the doors closed, I called out a little louder, "Hey, where are your parents?" He didn't turn around. He didn't even pause. The doors closed, and I stared at the little digital panel above the elevator, expecting it to show what floor he was going to. But the number didn't change. It stayed on 4. The elevator wasn't moving. I pressed my nurse call button immediately and told her I saw the kid again, that he got into the elevator. She opened my door with a confused look and said, "That elevator's locked for maintenance after midnight. It doesn't go anywhere." I pointed down the hall. "He's in there." She walked over and pressed the call button. The elevator opened, empty, lights on, completely normal. She checked the hallway cameras. No child showed up on the feed, not entering the hallway, not walking toward the elevator, nothing. I honestly started wondering if I had imagined it, maybe from lack of sleep or medication. Until the next day during lunch, when an older nurse I hadn't met before brought my meal tray. She noticed me glancing toward the hallway and said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed awkwardly and told her I kept seeing a little boy in a black hoodie walking around at night. Her face changed immediately. She didn't smile. She didn't joke. She just asked, "Does he go to the elevator?" I froze. "Yeah," I said. "How'd you know?" She sat down in the chair next to me like she needed to brace herself. Then she told me something that still gives me chills. Years before I became a patient, a 9-year-old boy had been brought in after a major fall. Internal injuries, broken ribs, a punctured lung. They rushed him into emergency surgery, but complications kept happening. His father never left the hospital. He paced the halls every night, following his son wherever the staff moved him. The kid loved elevators. Even when he was sick, he used to press every button and laugh as the doors opened and closed. But the night before his second surgery, he wandered out of his room around 3 a.m. Security cameras caught him walking toward the elevator. He stood there for almost 5 minutes, just stood there, staring. When a nurse found him, he told her he wanted to go down, but the man in the elevator wanted him to wait. That was his exact phrase. They got him back, into his room. He didn't survive the next morning's surgery. After that, some staff reported seeing a child wandering alone at night, always toward the elevators, always in the same slow, quiet way. And every time someone tried to talk to him, he never responded, never looked up, never interacted. The nurse finished her story and said softly, "If you see him again, don't call out, don't follow him, and don't go near the elevator." I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept my door completely closed, lights on, TV on, everything. But around 3 a.m., I heard something I'll never forget. The elevator dinged once, twice, 3 times, slow, evenly spaced, like someone was pressing the button over and over. I turned the TV volume up and covered my head with the blanket. I didn't look. I didn't move. I didn't want to know if that kid was standing outside my door. I was discharged 2 days later. And in all the years since, I haven't stepped into a hospital elevator alone. Not once. Because every time those doors start to close, I swear I can feel something standing behind me, watching, waiting, like it's trying to see if I'll turn around. My name is Lucas, and for almost 4 years, I volunteered as an EMT at a rural hospital in West Virginia. It wasn't a big place. Only 3 floors, low budget, and old enough that you could still see the original 1950s tiles in some of the hallways if they ever moved a bed or cabinet that had been sitting there for decades. So my shifts were usually overnight, starting at 11 p.m. and ending when the morning staff rolled in. It wasn't an EMT job the way people usually imagine it. We weren't rushing out on calls during those hours. My duties were mostly internal, assisting nurses, transporting patients between departments, checking equipment, and something we called night rounds. Night rounds meant walking through the empty or low-traffic wings of the hospital, making sure locked doors stayed locked, making sure visitors weren't where they shouldn't be, making sure no one had wandered into places that hadn't been used in years. I didn't like doing rounds. Nobody did. Especially not in the South Wing. That wing was the oldest part of the hospital. It had been built first, back when the building was still surrounded by farmland. By the time I started working there, the wing was basically abandoned. The hospital kept planning a renovation, but budget problems pushed it back every year. So the wing stayed dark, empty, cold. Still, every night we had to walk down there and check each door manually, and I always hated it. This story happened on the tail end of my 3rd year. It was early spring, the kind of cold where the air still feels sharp at night. I remember because I kept rubbing my hands together as I walked through the halls that night. It always felt colder inside the hospital at that hour than it did outside. The shift had been easy so far. 1 transport, 1 minor fall in the ER. Nothing stressful. Around 3:25 a.m., I got the radio call. "Lucas, do a sweep of the South Wing before report." I didn't respond right away because I already knew what that meant. That wing always felt wrong. Everyone said so. And it wasn't just that it was old or dark or silent. It felt occupied. Like someone was always just around the corner. Like every room was watching you when you walked past. But it was my job. I took the main hallway and flicked on my flashlight. The South Wing lights didn't respond to the regular motion sensors, so the whole stretch stayed black unless you turned the overheads on manually, which we weren't supposed to do unless it was an emergency. From the moment I crossed the threshold into that wing, the temperature dropped noticeably. It always did. The ER could be warm, the ICU could be warm, even the stairwell stayed warm. But the South Wing felt like walking into a freezer. I started my usual routine, working down the hall from room 201 to 212. Every room was sealed off and covered with dust sheets, like a ghost town. I didn't expect anything weird to happen at first, but the deeper I got into the hallway, the more wrong the air felt. There's no other way to describe it. The hospital already had that sterile smell, but in the South Wing, it always smelled faintly sweet, like dried flowers or old perfume, and the air felt heavy, like walking underwater. I reached room 206 halfway down the hall. That's when I heard it. A voice, a woman's voice, low, muffled, like someone whispering angrily under their breath. I froze. Every muscle in my body turned to stone. I tilted my head, trying to make out words, but it wasn't words. It was more like tone, urgent, uneasy, not crying, not yelling, whispering. And it was definitely inside room 206. I stood there for a full minute, listening. The whispering didn't stop. I knocked on the doorframe with the back of my knuckle. Instant silence. The air grew colder so fast that I saw a faint cloud of my own breath. Inside, a sealed hospital wing. In March. That alone made the hair rise on my arms. I leaned closer to the door. Nothing. I tried the handle. It opened. Just a crack at first. I pushed the door open slowly, letting my flashlight sweep across the room. Everything was draped in white plastic sheets. The old bed frames, the counters, the cabinets. Dust floated through the beam of light, thick enough that it looked like smoke. I stepped inside. My boots crunched against debris on the floor, peeling paint chips, broken tiles, little things that would have been cleaned if anyone actually used the place. The whispering was gone. Completely gone. But somehow, the room felt occupied. I scanned left, then right. Nothing. Nobody. Just the dark outline of a mirror on the far wall, half covered by a plastic sheet. My flashlight started flickering. I smacked the side of it. It steadied for a moment, then flickered again. The beam jumped and warped, making the shadows look like they were moving. Then something changed in the room. I didn't hear it first, I felt it, a presence behind me. I spun around with the flashlight up. Nothing. My breath got heavier. I felt sweat on my palms despite the cold. And then, my light drifted back toward the mirror. The plastic sheet wasn't fully covering it anymore. It had slipped, revealing part of the glass, and in the reflection, in the corner behind me, a woman stood facing the wall. Her head was tilted downward. Her hair was long and black, hanging over her shoulders. She was wearing an old hospital gown, the thin kind that tied in the back. Her bare feet were turned inward slightly, like she was trying to balance on them. I whipped around, flashlight outstretched. No one there. I aimed the beam back at the mirror. The corner was empty in the reflection. The woman was gone. At that point, I wanted to get out. I started heading for the door, fast. But as I reached the hall, something made me stop cold. Footsteps, soft ones, coming from further down the dark hallway, not rushed, not loud, just slow, steady, dragging steps on the tile floor. I leaned out and aimed my flashlight toward the far end. Nothing. But the footsteps didn't stop. They were coming toward me, steady, measured, like someone shuffling in hospital slippers. I backed into the doorway of room 206 again, gripping the flashlight so tight my hand hurt. The footsteps grew louder, closer, but no one was appearing. And then, suddenly, they stopped, right outside the room. I don't know why I did it. I think fear made me reckless, but I stepped into the hallway and swung the flashlight to the left. Nothing. I swung it to the right, and for a split second, I saw someone standing at the far end of the wing. A dark silhouette, tall, still, head tilted, staring in my direction. Before my brain even processed what I was seeing, the overhead light at that end flickered, and just like that, the figure was gone. I ran. Full sprint. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care about rounds. I didn't care about finishing the sweep. I just ran until I hit the lit hallway on the other side, gasping like I'd just been underwater. When I got to security, I told them something felt off in the south wing and that they should check the cameras. They pulled up the feed, and my heart dropped straight into my stomach. There, on the screen, at the exact time I'd been in room 206, a figure stood just outside the doorway, not moving, just standing there, head tilted, bare feet, hospital gown. The footage showed the figure for nearly 15 seconds. Then, in one frame, she was gone. Not walking away, not turning. Gone. I quit 3 weeks later. People can say whatever they want. Old buildings make noise, cameras glitch, anxiety plays tricks on you. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt standing in that hallway. I know what reflected in that mirror. And I'm not the only one. Because every EMT who's worked that wing has a story, and every story starts the same way. I heard someone talking in room 206. Every once in a while, I drive past that hospital at night. The south wing windows are still dark, still boarded up, still untouched. But when you're parked outside on a quiet night, sometimes you can see movement behind the glass. Just a shadow, just a shape, just enough to make you look twice, just enough to remind you that some rooms never stay empty. Not really.